time for your Google is Evil update, and it's time for the NewsBusters podcast. I'm your executive editor, Tim Graham. With me today, managing editor Curtis Houck and MRC president, head honcho David Bozell.
Hey, Tim.
Welcome. Congressman Jim Jordan announced some big news on Tuesday. Google commits to offer all creators previously kicked off YouTube due to political speech violations to return to the platform. Google also admitted the Biden administration pressured them to suppress misinformation, which we already knew because Zuckerberg said the same thing about Meta, but still nice to get them. MRC Vice President for Free Speech America, Dan Schneider, did say Google has finally entered a 12-step program to address its TDS. But Curtis's favorite,
That's a good line.
Oliver Darcy, called it Google's GOP gift to re-platform toxic actors like Bongino and Bannon.
Oh, yes. We're talking about harm reduction, as his former colleague Brian Stelter said when talking about Fox News. We have to remember here that Oliver Darcy is the same loser who said a few years ago, no, DirecTV, you need to get rid of not just One America News, you need to get rid of Newsmax, and you need to get rid of Fox News because they're basically bad for America. This guy, his newsletter is just an absolute bender. Like one night after another, just bangers full of stupidity.
Yeah, actually, if you compare the Darcy newsletter to Stelter's newsletter, Stelter, I mean, it's buried in there, but Stelter actually had two boring paragraphs instead of going off on Google. So there is a difference between the two of them. Now, Jorge Bonilla last night.
Well, can I ask one
Yes.
thing about YouTube?
Yes.
And I wish we had a lawyer here. If you were kicked off, and I know you sign your life away when you sign up to be a YouTube creator, but if you were kicked off, is there any legal recourse?
Yeah.
There must be.
To right now that they've admitted that,
Well, especially now. That's where I think everybody's going to be let in, because if they're still going to hold anybody else out, wouldn't you say?
Well, then there's also going to be...
I'd look into some sort of class action.
Well, then what we would involve the
all the
government?
Robert Malones of the world and all those guys that were kicked off for COVID stuff. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
I'd join forces.
There's layers to this because it would involve not just Alphabet, Google, and YouTube's parent company, but it would also involve the federal government, because you probably would get someone trying to say, or Google might try to say, no, we were forced into doing this by the federal government. The federal government was telling us to do something that was wrong, and they forced our hand.
Okay.
So it would catch both of them, actually, which obviously would make it a lot messier, but...
But the obvious point to some degree is, a lot of these people were shut down because of so-called COVID misinformation. And now, when you talk about school shutdowns or mask mandates, it's like the science somehow shifted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Google also has to answer for all of its election interference over the years and downgrading Trump's campaign websites, which we've documented ad nauseum, upgrading Kamala's campaign websites, upgrading Joe Biden's campaign websites to the first tier, first page, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember when we put out the report about Google's election interference and Trump threatened to sue him into extinction. That was October of 24. So I think they still got to answer for that. I mean, again, for years and years and years, they suggested that they were not taking down people for their COVID misinformation, or it was a violation of their guidelines. But it wasn't a violation of their guidelines. Biden told him to do it.
yeah,
Right.
there were certainly examples.
Where's the guideline there?
Yeah, the example is
We'll let you publish something unless the president of the United States team says no?
Google was basically saying that we had our own procedures and policies, but Biden wanted us to censor things that did not violate our policies, and that's the point. So we compare that free speech issue to the Jimmy Kimmel free speech issue.
Yeah.
So Jorge Bonilla last night said ABC and CBS and NBC's evening newscast has done 15 minutes over the last 2 nights on Kimmel, the free speech hero. They haven't touched this.
Yeah, September 23rd and September 24th, 2 nights of evening newscasts, 30 minutes each, 15 minutes and 1 second, which I think is just, that number is
Well, we
We
astronomical.
should have had Kimmel crying in the pool. I mean, that was the obvious one
that's
on
an
the bingo
easy bet.
card that no one picked
Yeah.
in the building. We were trying to figure out what he would do.
Well,
He does.
and no one said crying, and he does cry.
I said
It's
crying.
kind of like the John
And
Boehner. Oh, you did?
A lot of my appearances,
like the John
leading up to
Boehner
his
of
return. Yes.
Talk show hosts.
There we go. That's the line. Jimmy Kimmel is the John Boehner of late night TV. And to your point, something from last month that FSA pointed out that to show that there's still a lot of work to do. Gabriela Parasol took a look at Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, and OpenAI AI media contracts to use content to help generate AI responses. And she found 59% of all content contracts for news were with liberal outlets such as The Atlantic, Vox, the New York Times, Google, whereas only 5% involved the right, which, and of that, it's Fox News and the New York Post.
Well, I mean, David, we've seen this across Apple TV or apple.com, and wherever you're getting news, they all want to go to trusted sources. I wanted to ask you about what the free speech people have been doing. You and Dan sent a letter to Secretary of State Rubio about this global problem, because it's not just a domestic problem.
Yeah. Biden had 57 different, we call them censorship initiatives within the administration. The chief among them, and number one on our list, was this sort of global pact that Secretary of State Blinken had engaged in, essentially this global thought police. And it kind of originated from what the Google COVID censorship. So, wow, if Google could do it, then maybe we should just do this globally. Mm-hmm. And so Blinken puts together this pact, and that was number one on Biden's list of initiatives to essentially control speech. And so you're right, Dan, MIA, and we tease him affectionately. But Dan and I sent a letter to the Secretary of State, and we knew that this was something that Secretary Rubio wanted to untangle the United States from, and this week he did. So we're super excited about that.
The irony of the superior irony of all this is we all know that Antony Blinken was the guy running around saying Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. The idea that Tony Blinken's running an anti-disinformation op is hilarious.
Well, the guy who had all the Spotify playlists for all of his foreign trips that he would put out, he plays the guitar, he's so
cool. They had a censorship empire cooking, and it would have put the conservative movement out of business.
Well,
it would have put conservative thought out of business, really.
And the way I think about this is, for all the talk about Doge cuts, about trimming people, employees, shrinking the size of government, just from an initiative standpoint, a policy standpoint, you have to wonder, why in the hell is the State Department involved in censorship with big tech companies? And it's the exact same thing with Homeland Security that you can't forget. Nina Jankowicz at DHS, with Alejandro Mayorkas, with the Disinformation Governance Board. What in the world does that have to do with making sure planes don't blow up?
Right.
Or
government
the Coast
Guard. Bloat, anti-free speech actors embedding themselves within the federal apparatus who think they have a great idea to take down conservative thought and conservative speech, and using our federal tax dollars to do it.
Well, and
we were paying for us to be silenced.
This is one of the things about Doge that was very interesting, the way that Trump 2.0 is going at this, because you can look at the VOA, you can look at USAID. A lot of those things were all about messaging on an international scale, and Trump was basically, I'm going to take this apart. And you knew that VOA was basically international NPR, because all of these 60 Minutes and all of these people are doing stories about PBS NewsHour, doing these glorious stories about how the Voice of America is so fabulous. And I'm like, if they love it this much, it's got to be a left-wing propaganda channel.
Yeah. Well, and the VOA is supposed to be, by charter, the propaganda arm of the United States.
Right. I mean, you think about why it was formed.
To celebrate us.
Yeah, you think about why it was formed. It was to pump American blood, red-blooded freedom
values, the whole bit,
into the Soviet Union, communist China, Cuba, all that good stuff.
Instead, they decided that they were going to be their own journalism outfit, air quotes, and dog the president of the United States, Trump.
Yeah.
That's what they thought they were going to be able to do until Trump and Elon shut it down.
Well,
like,
I mean,
wait a second.
in a Cold War era, at a time when Democrats and Republicans at some point were both anti-communist, that's when it started. And, obviously over the years and once the Cold War ended, under Obama or Biden, it just becomes globalist like everything else the Democrats touch.
Yeah. Kudos to Jorge, by the way, for the
So,
for the
Curtis,
15 minutes.
yes, kudos to Jorge.
Yeah.
Curtis, you mentioned former GOP Congressman Peter Meyer was on CNN Tuesday looking like a hippie, but he was the current stand-in for Michael Singleton and Scott Jennings on this censorship issue.
Yeah, CNN, they need to pick up Peter Meyer because, there's 4 rock-ribbed conservatives on CNN. Scott Jennings, he's giving a lot more speeches. He has his show on Salem. Michael Singleton has his gun channel. David Urban does a lot of lobbying stuff. Brad Todd does some campaign things. So these guys can only be in so many places at once.
What's Peter's background?
He's a former congressman from Michigan, and he's of the Meyer grocery store family as well. And one of the things that he pointed out that I think was so important was everyone's losing their minds about Jimmy Kimmel. Everybody's so upset about this entire thing, but yet they're completely forgetting, oh, wait, the Biden administration actually did strong arm people into silencing conservatives or to just silencing anybody. Because this is the grand conspiracy, Always Sunny gif with the guy at the whiteboard. That's what they're saying what happened with Jimmy Kimmel, that it was directly like Brendan Carr himself silenced Jimmy Kimmel and put him in timeout for a week. And he's pointing out, in a back and forth with this guy, Dan Ho, who was a special staff assistant to Joe Biden, that no, actually, this is what your administration did. What you guys are saying the Trump administration did to Jimmy Kimmel with the FCC is what you guys actually did.
Yeah, Kimmel was down for 4 nights, and these accounts have been deplatformed for years.
Right, exactly. And in the quote that he said, he pointed out that all of this, Kimmel was going back to ABC. This man has not been silenced. Charlie Kirk has been silenced because he's dead. A lot of conservatives were silenced on social media platforms because the government threatened those social media companies, Facebook, Google, Twitter, you can all go down the list. YouTube, again, just acknowledged to Congress that they did it at the behest of the Biden administration. And then, of course, but the retort from the Biden person was like, well, do you agree with what happened to Jimmy Kimmel? And Peter Meyer was like, I don't care about Jimmy Kimmel.
Well, look, there's been a lot of whataboutism in these 2 discussions. And so if you just to clear the deck here, Disney puts out a statement and saying they're going to bring that they've had thoughtful discussions with Jimmy Kimmel and they're going to bring Jimmy Kimmel back. Okay, nowhere in Disney's statement did Disney say, and oh, by the way, it was President Trump and his administration that asked us to take him down. Nowhere.
Right.
None.
Google comes out and says, yes, by the way, we've been censoring conservative influencers, conservative thought for many, many years. And oh, by the way, it was the Biden administration that pressured us to do it. And I think they even said that they've got receipts if anybody wants them. So, those are the 2 differences, right? You've got 2 major corporations, one saying the Democrat administration is the one who pressured us, and the other, Disney, not saying that the Trump administration did.
This is what gets me because, yes, their narrative on Jimmy Kimmel was the authoritarian playbook has been opened again. And this is where it's like, why don't you acknowledge that Biden had an authoritarian playbook? But it's like, again, their view on freedom of speech is it's best for me and not for thee. I mean, they're like, freedom of speech isn't hampered when we shut you down.
This gets into the nonsense about having a right to a television show, Tim.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, Jimmy Kimmel somehow has a right to a TV show. Are you kidding me? Whereas, like, if you are shut down from Facebook, X, YouTube, all those things, you're put lower down the scale or not at all on Google search results, that is the public square. What many years ago over in Europe would be the public square where people could talk about things, or civic groups in the early days of the United States, is now social media. So if you are removed from that, not only is your livelihood taken away, because a lot of people make money off of that with their monetized accounts, your livelihood and your status, your social status, is completely removed. Whereas what Peter Meyer was saying, Jimmy Kimmel still has a voice. He can go somewhere else.
Right.
And the thing is, what Kimmel said was a lie. He pointed out that in the early days after the Charlie Kirk assassination, 1 in 3 Democrats believed that the person who assassinated Charlie Kirk had a right of center beliefs. And to your point, David, about Disney, it was clear based on reporting from CNN, Hollywood Reporter, and others that they went to Kimmel and said, hey, you got to say something here. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm going to double down.
Yeah.
And they realized between affiliate pressure and what Kimmel wanted to do, you're like, no.
No one's ever, including Kimmel, has ever refuted the Hollywood Reporter expose that he wanted to double down the next night. Nobody.
And I think that's clear because he did refuse to apologize, and he really came in and lied all over again. I never intended to make light of this. Yes, you did. Everything he said was a lie.
He apologized that people were offended.
Yeah.
which is not a thing.
Which is what we could have expected.
Yeah.
And he's back on. He's already back on this thing, and
Sinclair and Nexstar are still
He's doing
out.
Trump's a dictator every night.
They didn't carry it Tuesday or Wednesday night. And, the prediction, I think, for some folks is that they may let them back. But as of now, that Iger is going to let Sinclair and Nexstar have a little bit of space because the reporting is he believes that if he tries to strong arm them now, he's only going to make it worse.
I'm sure those guys are saying, "How can we make up the difference with our own stuff?"
Right. Yeah. Well, and also that you have to think about it. We've talked about this here, but also other appearances too, about like local media, because it's not only just about national advertising; it's about local advertisers. And if local advertisers don't want to be a part of that, that's a huge piece of the pie. And just the last thing I'll just say is this is Wednesday night. Alex found for us that Kimmel again said, quote, "It's hard to tell the difference between gulags in America."
Right. Which is really a vicious lie. Speaking of authoritarian playbooks, ICE.
Joy.
Terrible ICE. An active shooter hit 3 detainees at an ICE facility in Dallas yesterday, killing one before the gunman turned the gun on himself. Bill D'Agostino made a video for us in what felt like an hour of just MSNBC hosts lobbying and guests lobbying this Gestapo line. Let's take a look.
ICE is looking more and more like an American Gestapo.
They're huddled around the elevator banks in masks without identifying information. What a terrifying, these are Gestapo tactics.
But it has created this year, as they've seen, the kind of fascist ICE Gestapo militias go round up Latino American citizens in places like LA.
ICE agents, masked ICE Gestapo agents, getting more funding than any other law enforcement agency in the history of the United States.
ICE running Gestapo-like around our country.
The Gestapo had the same function. It was there to draw a distinction between us and them. It was not federally, it was controlled by the leader. And we're seeing disturbing similarities between this force and the Gestapo.
We've got these masked thug cowards kidnapping innocent people and sending them off to be slaves or tortured in other countries.
Dressing like thugs and acting like thugs.
People still want to come here despite the crazy. They still want to come here because they know in this land, their voice is protected. Their rights are protected. And there won't be jackbooted thugs coming in wearing masks over their face to take them off the streets. Oh, wait. I'm sorry, Simone, that's happening.
Oh, it's happening.
That's happening right now.
Now, my favorite was so-called public radio host Maria Hinojosa, who compared ICE to the Nazi murderers of Anne Frank. And she said on the south side of Chicago, there are little Anita Francos who are worried about deportation is somehow to Auschwitz.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. She blood on her hands. I'm sorry. You just can't be going down that path. Night after night after night. Blood on MSNBC's hands. ICE blood is on MSNBC's hands. There. Because you just can't go night after night and call them Nazis and Gestapo night after night and not expect somebody to turn loose with a gun. You just can't.
And attacks on ICE officers are up 1,000% since January. And I think you can clearly say, I don't love blaming crime on a climate of rhetoric, but we all know that the network climate of rhetoric here has been, don't demonize the illegal immigrants. That's unfair. They're not all bad actors. Well, they feel completely vindicated to say we're going to demonize every ICE officer. There is no such thing as a good apple. They're all the Gestapo, and that's really the tenor of immigration reporting right now. So that's the problem.
Even in the coverage of the ICE attack, Wednesday night, ABC World News Tonight, Maria Villarreal, which I like to think we had an effect because I tweeted about it, and then Jorge wrote a blog about it. By Thursday's Good Morning America, she dropped this line from her report. While casings found at the scene of that assassination also bore written messages, according to law enforcement. While critics say the mask-wearing, often plainclothes ICE officers often terrorize terrorist communities, Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons says they're just doing their jobs.
Right.
And then she tries to have this both sides thing talking about political violence, even though, there was a study done, I believe, out of Rutgers and some extremist group that I wrote about from last Friday's NBC Nightly News a week ago that, about 50% of people, respondents, young left of center folks, could see justified violence against President Trump. Charlie Kirk himself shared it in one of his final tweets, pointing out that this is the thing. And then on Thursdays today, we're again doing this game about motive. Priscilla Thompson, while President Trump and members of his administration are tying this attack to what they call rhetoric on the left against ICE and law enforcement, investigators on the ground say the shooter's motive remains unclear.
They always do this. This has been a real problem, again, where somehow network reporters and hosts think that the way to get ahead in your career is to sound as clueless as possible. is to go.
So we have a copycat killer with the casings.
Yeah.
Now that's the in vogue thing to do now. If you're going to take a shot at somebody, write a message on a bullet casing.
Really tiny font, yeah.
Well, I would say, yes, the climate deniers here, in this case, the rhetoric climate deniers, they were all running around on Twitter and elsewhere saying, anti-ICE, that's just too simple. It's too obvious. It must be trolling. It can't actually be authentic. I mean, that's what they're stuck with.
Yeah.
Because when you shoot into an ICE facility, it's anti-ICE. Just like when you shoot Charlie Kirk, you're anti-Charlie Kirk. Yeah. Motives are unclear. If someone shot up an ABC station, you'd think it was anti-ABC. Although, oops, ABC didn't cover the shooting of the ABC station.
Well, I mean, in terms of motive, they very vaguely kind of tiptoed around that. Oh, this thing happened. I don't know. But the rhetoric, again, it totally matches up. The person there, the suspect there, their social media page was littered with all kinds of nonsense. He left a note in his car basically saying that Trump and all these other Trump public officials are next. Mm-hmm. The Charlie Kirk suspect as well. You even tie Brian Thompson, the United Healthcare CEO, with Luigi Mangione into this as well.
Is the motive unclear on that one?
Yeah, in the motive, yeah, exactly.
Well, they're making musicals about him. So.
Yeah, in San Francisco, and it was totally fine. The local media there didn't have an issue with it. But also on NBC, it was pointed out that someone who was in Boy Scouts with the shooter in Dallas pointed out that he had been upset with how immigration was being handled in the country and that people did not understand the desperation of people trying to get out of a bad situation. So again, this is directly tied to the media's rhetoric about this, that these people are fascists, that these people are heartless, that they're Nazis. And then, yes, to your point about a crazy person and blood on your hands, it's like, well, what do you expect when you say that someone echoes the worst kinds of people in history? And even Jimmy Kimmel Wednesday night talking about gulags. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, what do we do to people who set up gulags? It's going to have an effect.
And then the subsequent coverage of it is, well, we don't know why you did it, and we have no earthly idea. I think this is going to continue. You're going to breed more copycats with this kind of flippant coverage of these types of events. ICE's charter is to remove viciously criminal, illegal aliens from our country. Any sober presentation of that, of any sober reporting, would mention that and essentially, I don't know about celebrate, but just cover that fairly.
Right.
Saying they're doing their jobs, right, and they ought not be shot at for doing their jobs. But this continued, we don't know why bullet holes were rattling through ISIS headquarters is is going to breed more copycats. I'm sorry.
So Craig Bannister reported for us that NBC News has, quote unquote, corrected its online story, claiming ICE agents used a 5-year-old autistic girl as bait to pressure her illegal alien father to surrender. But that's not until DHS actually sent on a note go, that's not the way this happened. So apparently he abandoned his daughter. He went running when he saw ICE. So they didn't use her as bait. He left her behind, and then they had to go, oops. I don't think that story made the network.
No.
So at least the error was contained.
Contained, yes. It was contained to the online, but my critique on that is this is part and parcel with the disappearing rhetoric that we see, that ICE is just disappearing people. I see this on Instagram and Facebook all the time with liberals and people that I knew growing up, and they're saying that they're kidnapping and disappearing people. And again, there's no evidence to that. It completely ignores whatever criminal record they had besides entering the country illegally, and it's completely irresponsible kind of stuff.
Well, let's go back to what disappearing used to mean. That a lot of times they were talking about like Pinochet's Chile, and what would happen is you'd literally go missing and presumed dead. So is that what ICE is doing? Are they executing people?
Still happens in China.
I mean, that's the incendiary nature of what they're saying when they run around saying disappearing people.
Yeah.
Or kidnapping. Again, they're suggesting that ICE are the criminals, not the criminal aliens. And there's nobody who's deported is guilty of anything. We saw that with Kilmar, the heroic human trafficker, wife abuser.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that I would say is not reported thus far in the Dallas story as well is the sound bites from acting director Lyons and other officials, Tricia McLaughlin, others, pointing out that they're advocating and they're outraged about what happened in Dallas, that while no officers were killed, illegal immigrants were, because those people were denied due process. But I was under the impression that the Trump administration was completely heartless. They were disappearing people and they were just throwing them away.
Another oops.
Yeah, another oops, that they're talking about the idea that, yes, illegal immigrants may have these rap sheets. They may have entered the country illegally. They may have abused children. They may have committed murder. They may have stolen cars or something like that. But random people don't get to just off them from a rooftop.
Yeah, and this is not the first attack on an ICE facility in Texas. Just a couple weeks ago, it happened in Alvarado, Texas, where some people were shooting into an ICE facility. I think in that case, they did hit ICE personnel. And so
the one that went viral early in the week in Chicago, I mean, they're super lucky somebody didn't pop a gun out on that one. That got gnarly.
So, I mean, I think that it amazes me because these people had such great passion for Capitol police officers who were beaten on January 6th. And that was law enforcement. And they talked all about MAGA not having any respect for law enforcement. ICE is law enforcement. So why do they have no respect for ICE? I think the double standard there is really obvious.
And they're playing stupid about the idea about masks, like that facial recognition is not somehow a thing.
Why would ICE take down their masks? If you go on TikTok, you go on Instagram, there are just hundreds, if not, it's just a flood of anti-ICE, death to ICE, F-ICE videos and commentary from the entire left-wing radical spectrum. And when the president says, I'm blaming this on the radical left, that's who he's blaming it on. These kids and these influencers on the left that are pumping video after video after video on these very influential platforms, cursing law enforcement for doing their jobs. And this is why I think there's going to be more copycats.
Well, let's shift to future episodes of Bias because...
Tylenol.
Well, yeah, we could have a government shutdown looming. Speaker Johnson put out a statement that said House Republicans have already done the job of passing a clean bipartisan bill to keep the government open. Now it's up to Senate Democrats, who've long said shutdowns are bad and hurt people, to vote to fund the American government or shut it down because they want to restore taxpayer-funded benefits to illegal aliens. Schumer was on the PBS NewsHour last night, and basically, as usual...
They're still here?
Yeah, they're still funded for a few more days. But PBS, pressures him like, are you going to shut down, please? I mean, it's kind of sad. What are you hearing, David, on the Hill?
Well, look, I've long said this publicly. I think CRs are the root of all evil. I just can't stand them.
Yeah.
However, that said, I can't stand a Congress, a Republican Congress, that can't seem to cut anything on their own. So, tactically, do we want to just do? I'll forgive a CR if they're going to come back on the back end with rescissions and more cuts from the President of the United States and just vote on them that way. If that's the way we cut the size of government, then let's do it. And that worked with PBS and a lot of USAID stuff. And so wash, rinse, repeat on that strategy. Schumer wants to pick this fight over Obamacare subsidies that expire. They're sort of not really part and parcel of the CR itself. I think it's going to be quite complicated for him. Now they think it's quite simple that the Trump administration wants to take away their health care. Not to get too wonky and in the weeds, but there's when this provision was passed in Obamacare, it was reflective of what you're eligible for that subsidy if you were up to 400% above the federal poverty line. Biden, in one of his reconciliation packages, upped that to 600% of the poverty line. So there's a lot of Republicans and I think some honest Democrats who are sitting in districts like, do we really need to subsidize health care for a guy who has a country club membership? I mean, it's kind of where we're at. And we're not subsidized health care, it's subsidized insurance. So, and again, it's not even part and parcel kind of related to the CR. The CR will just kind of keep things moving. But that provision ends at the end of the year. They're going to have to either come up with some agreement. I think Republicans are determined to shrink that max poverty line level, and good on them for doing so.
So if they put it back to the Obama level, is that heartless budget cutting?
Right.
Because I mean, this is the sort of game
which
that
Democrats
they play.
all voted for in mass.
What Curtis and I would look at this and say, our experience with shutdowns in the last 10 years, or maybe back into the Obama years, is that the Democrats can operate with impunity knowing they have a press corps that's going to carry all their talking points and try to punish Republicans for being the government shutdowners.
Look, I'm all for it. Like, you want to go shut it down, Schumer? Fine. That's fine. I would love nothing more if Russ Vought and President Trump were in charge of the federal government apparatus for a couple of weeks. Sure. That's good that we could show finally, have an opportunity as if you're a Republican, conservative in these fights, you can show finally that government shutdowns don't hurt anybody. And it's an awesome opportunity. I don't think Schumer is going to go for it. I think come Monday, there's a number of senators, Democrat senators, I think over a dozen, that Schumer has not persuaded to go down this path. And I think right now Schumer is just going on PBSs of the world and saying, I really want to fight. I really want to fight. And then come Monday, he's going to figure out that he doesn't have the votes to do it.
Well, when he said last time, I'm not going to shut down the government because all this nasty things Trump will do.
Right.
That's when, he went on PBS and got hammered and said the Republicans are tougher than you. Why aren't you tougher on the Republicans? Which is apparently what PBS does. PBS and NPR are the ones that enforce the left-wing hardline.
Yeah.
He's got to think about his own future. He's got to be worried about AOC running against him or something.
Yeah, the reporting out of Axios says
he has no real cards to play.
Yeah.
He just doesn't. And I know he knows it. So I think right now, while there's no votes happening and while there's a lot of pressure to do something, okay, sure, stand up and say, I want to fight too. I want to fight. But again, I'll predict come Monday, there's going to be a dozen plus Democrats who say, we don't, this is not polling well, or we just don't have the messaging down right, or what are we fighting for? That's really, really unclear. We're going to fight to 600% above the poverty line. That's the thing that we're going to fight about.
Yeah, they'll make a few of them walk the plank. I mean, my quick hits are, Eric Erickson always loves to point it out, our buddy, that in a shutdown, Ross Vought at OMB gets to decide, basically who's deemed essential. And I think that alone is just such a fun prospect to force Democrats to go into, versus really anybody else in that position. The ultimate, perhaps one of the most lampooned, attacked, smeared people in the entire administration being in charge of deciding basically who stays open and who doesn't. And the idea that he's floated about preparing for mass shutdowns or mass layoffs.
Yeah.
That is
permanent.
A permanent layoffs. That is
Yeah.
another huge thing that they have there as well. And then my other point on the media coverage, they always do this game, and they did this with COVID funding, Tim, where they try to say, oh, these people or this poor school district or these people are now going to be left without this, without pointing out the fact that a lot of that funding or some of these provisions about raising the poverty line to receive subsidies were done in COVID, that they were never meant to be permanent.
Yes, true.
That these people were not receiving, subsidies, welfare 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, but now they are.
The entire Democratic Party political model is creating dependencies. And
Correct.
obviously, part of what the AOCs of the world are probably thinking is, we want to shut down, which will infuriate federal bureaucrats so we can win races in Virginia in a few weeks. There's all kinds of calculations.
Probably going to win anyway, but
I say New Jersey's going to be closer than Virginia.
Okay, Brett Baker.
I agree.
You're always a pessimist.
I know. Well, there has been good Republican early vote turnout in Virginia, so that's
we'll
good.
see.
That's good. I mean, remember, Russ is in charge of Doge now. So he knows all of their information. So when he says I could permanently lay you off, he knows exactly who he wants to lay off and why.
It's
right,
not like
and
he's
every
just toying with
every
it.
budget nook and cranny that a potential federal employee would be in charge of. So he. Again, we're on the same page on that one. I would love to give Russ an opportunity to do such things, but I do. When Doge offered the buyout to all the federal employees, I think they were kind of surprised that not as many people took them as they thought. Partly because we all live in Northern Virginia in the swamp, and I think we've all heard the same things, that a number of strident liberals who work in the federal apparatus did not trust Trump to honor the buyout conditions, so they didn't quit. So I think it was roughly 3.5% of the federal workforce took the buyout.
Womp.
Yeah, and I thought they thought. I think the Trump administration thought that would be bigger. Okay, fine, Schumer, if you're going to shut it down, that's going to get bigger in a hurry, and that would be, again, another conservative goal that we've been fighting for decades that Trump will have succeeded with.
All right, so to sum up, David Bozell is suggesting that this is not going to be a massive episode of media bias because Schumer will cave.
I think, Schumer will find a way to, Schumer will get cover from if there is such a thing as a moderate senator, but from the senators that are not up in 2026.
Fetterman. Well, I mean, it's just Fetterman right now.
Yeah, Fetterman voted yes already, but there's more behind him, and all they need is 3 or 4 or 5. So,
well, if you want to figure out what the episodes of Media Bias are, we're always here. Morning news, evening news, Sunday news shows. We're monitoring it all for you.
We're crazy. We watch all that stuff.
We do it all. Combat pay, whatever pay.
For you.
So you come to NewsBusters once, twice, 24 times a day. Thanks for listening.